Well, thank you so much for having me here today. It's such an honor to be with you and to talk a little bit about the legacy of Charles Erdman. Thank you for reading my resume, but I really just want to say, as having been at Princeton Seminary now for over 10 years, working here and an alum of the seminary myself, Charles Erdman is part of our family. And so that means I am part of your family and you are part of mine. And it's just so wonderful to be with you and just talk a little bit about Charles Erdman's legacy here. Today, November 1st, is All Saints' Day, and that is the day in the Christian tradition when we celebrate and mark all of the faithful who have gone before us and continue to cheer us on in Christian faith. And so it's a particularly poignant and appropriate day to talk about Charles Erdman and his legacy because he is part of the great cloud of witnesses that cheers us on. So to say a little bit about him, and I'm sure many of you here know more about him than I do, but as you may know, he was born July 20th, 1866 in Fayetteville, New York, to Henrietta Rosenberry Erdman and William Erdman. And then he came to Princeton and spent much of his life here, came here for his education, of course. I have a couple of photos that I'm going to share with you. And we'll also say our special collections at Archives here has a tremendous amount of material on Charles Erdman, which was given by the Erdman family when he passed away. So if you have more interest in Charles Erdman, our special collections team, they couldn't accommodate all of you at once today, but would love to welcome you at later points. There are 16 boxes of materials that contain his sermons, scrapbooks, writings, photographs, and other writings. So much we have to share about him. But he came here to Princeton for his education, what was then the College of New Jersey, now Princeton University. I don't know if he had an orange jacket, but he was class of 1886, and then came here to Princeton Seminary in his class of 1891. He was on the football team at Princeton, and so this is him here holding the ball. He also apparently liked to have a very good time. So here's a picture of Charles Erdman at a keg party at Princeton University. Is that right? Okay, very good. The genes are strong. So he was deeply formed here in the educational waters of Princeton, and then he was ordained as a Presbyterian minister in 1891 in the Presbytery of Philadelphia and served as the pastor of the Overbrook Presbyterian Church near Philadelphia, not too far from Bryn Mawr, I think, and then became pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Germantown. And then he came here at Princeton Seminary to serve as professor in 1906. And he served here for 30 years. And while he was here, also at one point served as pastor of First Presbyterian Church in Princeton for 10 years. And that is now Nassau Presbyterian Church, which is downtown. So he was deeply formed in the educational waters of Princeton, also deeply formed as a minister, as a person of the church. And that was really how he was known as a professor here at Princeton Seminary. When he came here in 1906, his appointment was actually very controversial. It was a time of a lot of turmoil and change in the church and in the world. And it was a time when the seminary really had to think about how its curriculum was adapting to serve the needs of the world. We're actually in another one of those moments right now. And so I frequently like to remind my colleagues about Charles Erdman and about the moment that he was here. He has actually developed a new tidbit this morning as I was reading about him that in that era, students at the seminary actually wrote a petition to the Board of Trustees because they wanted more instruction about the Bible in the English language. So historically, your Bible only taught in its original language of Hebrew and Greek, and they were asking for a different kind of instruction. The faculty at the time wasn't quite sure what they thought about that, but the board was responsive to those concerns, and so they formed a new role for a pastor of what was called practical theology. So someone who was well versed in actually leading in a congregation and could teach the Bible in English for a variety of people. But as I said, this was fairly controversial. So, and Erdman, when he came in 1906, took this up. And in his inaugural address of his first say into his faculty chair, he talked about this. This was part of what he said about the signs of the times. He said there was a multiplication of Bible schools and institutes, the ignorance of the scriptures openly confessed by ministers, the increasing demand for biblical instruction of lay workers, the revival of expository preaching. These and kindred signs of the times have convinced the trustees that for such a department there is a place among the disciplines of the theological curriculum, a place second in importance to none. So imagine you are starting a new job and you actually have to make the case for your job as you're starting, because not everyone is sure they want you to be there. He says, yet the trustees are confronted by an even more delicate and difficult problem. It is to so adjust this enlarged department to the seminary curriculum as to do no injustice to the other departments while meeting the imperious demand of the times. That was how we understood his charge, that he was leading the broader seminary. How do we meet the imperious demand of the times? And I think this is such a compelling question that continues to be before us in every age, including this one. While he was here, he, again, was such a leader in the faculty here and a leader in the church broadly. In 1925, he was elected moderator of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church. That's the leader of the Presbyterian Church nationally. And that was a time there was a lot of divisiveness in the church as well. It was fairly fractious in that era. And he was elected in part because he had such a reputation for being a kind and gracious person who could bring people together. And it was really attributed to him and his leadership that he kept the unity of the church at a time when it was about to break apart. And again, I think that model of leadership is so compelling. Even today, as we live in such a fractious world with a bitter partisan rancor, there's nothing new about that. And Charles Erdman was actually a person who thought about how to bring people together. He seemed to know a lot of people. He knew many different presidents, knew Woodrow Wilson, Grover Cleveland, Theodore Roosevelt, Calvin Coolidge. He was a prolific author, published 35 books that were translated into many different languages. If you look him up in the library catalog today, you will find 117 references of things that Charles Erdman authored. But perhaps what he was most known for, although he was a prolific scholar and a very important leader in the church, really prioritized personal relationships and friendships. There is a lot written about his character and how that brought people together. John Mackay, who was a student at Princeton Seminary, had him as a professor and later would become a president of Princeton Seminary. There is another building on our campus named after John Mackay. So these buildings sometimes talk to each other, right, because they are our legacies. But John Mackay once said about his experience with Charles Erdman, like he himself was a student. He said, the personality, teaching, and friendship of Professor Charles Erdman proved to be one of the most creative experiences of my life. For this man became, for a young Scottish student, the finest pattern I had known of what it means to be a Christian. When Charles Erdman died, his faculty colleagues wrote this about him. It was published in the Princeton Seminary Bulletin. They said this: we of the Princeton Seminary faculty wish to record our profound sense of loss at the passing of such a gifted, honored, beloved, and influential colleague and friend. His life and ministry are firmly written into the history of this seminary, the life of the church, and into the lives of those who taught and studied here. We will miss his friendly and inspiring presence, his warm concern for and support of the seminary, his noble and challenging example of Christian living, his youthful and inquisitive interest in church and theological matters, his generous and wide service in a number of community agencies, his warm and gracious enthusiasm for friendship, which was communicated in winsome smile, humorous anecdote, written note, encouraging word, meaningful gift, or personal visit. We are grateful to God for the gift of Charles Rosenberry Erdman, through whose devoted discipleship to Jesus Christ we have been richly blessed. Though dead, he yet speaketh to us in accents strong and clear. And his legacy, of course, continues to be part of the seminary community and part of our campus. So including the building where we are right now, which someone in here helped to design. There, you did walk past it when you came into the building, a plaque on the wall, which says that this building where we are now, Erdman Hall, is dedicated in memory of Charles Rosenberry Erdman and his wife, Estelle Pardee Erdman, who resided on this site for 55 years, offering Christian hospitality to countless students and friends of Princeton Theological Seminary. So their home was on this very site. In fact, this is a picture of their home. And at the dedication of Erdman Hall in 1971, it was said this: I would be remiss if I did not remind you that Erdman Hall is named for both Dr. and Mrs. Erdman. She was the former Estelle Pardee, described in all of the accounts I have seen of her as a most gracious person. I wish there might be adequate testimony to the many gifts that have flowed into many lives out of Dr. and Mrs. Erdman's home for a generation. And so this building, but even more important, the program of continuing education, which will be facilitated by it, is still another benefaction of the Erdmans, standing ready to meet the needs of future generations. It seems to me most appropriate that this facility established here, that the leading theological school of our denomination, and that it be dedicated in the memory of one of the foremost theological educators of our great church. So I'd just share with you as a conclusion, just a personal note of this. Charles Erdman's legacy is so personally inspiring to me as somebody who serves at the seminary today, is also an alum of the seminary, just like Charles Erdman. But this example of a kind of leadership that is about bringing people together, is about unity in a time when the world is going through a lot of change and turmoil, and is about hospitality and the impact that can have in individual people's lives. I find this such an inspiring part of what we are trying to do at Princeton Seminary even now. I happen to live on the seminary campus. I live just across the street from where Charles Erdman used to live. And last night I was gathered with some friends for Halloween, and I was telling them that I was going to meet with you today, and was telling them a little bit about Charles Erdman, who lived just across the street. We'll confess to you, we were enjoying a cocktail waiting for our fellow trick-or-treaters, and I showed the picture of Charles Erdman with the keg, and I said, I thought you would enjoy our gathering as well. But I also shared in a meeting this morning. I was meeting with our IT team, and we were talking about all the work that is before us. And they said, we're here just for a season. We are carrying on work that has come before us, and we will pass it on to the next generation. And let me tell you about Charles Erdman and the work that he did here, that we are carrying on and that we will pass on to the next. So thank you so much for your part and role in the Princeton Seminary story. You are part of the family here, and we are part of your family. And for that, we are just so very grateful.